I just know that guy. I've seen him before. Welcome back to the channel. I am Mrballen, and I am here giving you a reaction to the stories that I've made when I had longer hair and just a mustache. So, and a green screen. And I wasn't eating saltwater taffy. I'm going to put it down right now because I'm going to eat it in a little bit. Sorry, something moved. So I'm Kris. I am doing a requested reaction today by Sam from Holland about the frat boy did the unthinkable. So I'm going to do this. I'm 25 seconds in because I hit the record button and nothing happened, so I stopped and it's pause play. We're not going to go back 25 seconds because he doesn't cover anything really. Before I get started, I have to tell you, I want to thank the YouTube community for the gathering that we did. It was an organization called Roots. What was it called? Roots for Hippies. And I signed up for it. I didn't know what it was. And there were about 700 other million people signed up for it. We went to the Antarctic. And apparently the job was to give root canals to hippopotamus. We were under the impression that they wanted it. They did not. And so we tried to catch them. We lost a lot of good people that day. So we had to get them to stop charging us. So we just started hacking off the legs, you know, and then we put them on their back and we were tickling their tummies, you know, and they kept biting. We lost a lot of more YouTubers. And so we came up with the idea to, well, we'll just remove the head as well. But then we couldn't put the heads back on. And this is several hours. And we came to the conclusion, I remember this guy, Ted, he said, why don't we just use a tranquilizer dart? And we were like, where were you 300,000 dead hippo ago? You know what I mean? Like, what a stupid person. So we left Ted up there. Because it was such a great idea, but he came up with it so long after we needed it. You know, that's a worthless guy. And as we got on the, you know, the planes and stuff coming back, everyone else was kind of like, yeah, I thought of it too. And we were like, of course we did, but no one said it. You know, he's the dummy. So anyways, I'm going to burp. I'm going to mute it. It wasn't much. It sounded like a little dog growl. It was adorable. I should record that and put it on mugs and have a little button that you hit every time you're going to take a drink, like it's on the handle. And as you take a drink, you hear that little growl burp that I just had. Oh, I'm getting merch ideas. I won't do it, but I'm getting them. So anyways, like and subscribe to the channel because YouTube says it helps the algorithm. And if you don't, you're not going to be able to see my videos anymore. And one day I might stand up a little bit and you'll get to see these nips. But you know, no subscribers, no nips. I want to thank the 5 people who subscribed yesterday. That was very cool. Comment down there, leave some requests. I try to get to them. I've been busy lately, but I do see an opening where I should be able to get more of the requests done. But it's a bit of a struggle. It's Sunday morning. It's 8:25, and I'm going to be doing these. I've got about 4 or 5 videos I have to do. So I'm going to pound them out today, and if you see me eating saltwater taffy, it's the same day. Saltwater taffy and coffee. That's the heavenly combo. So let's just get into the video right now.
All notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
This, by the way, my band still plays this song. We just sold out Philadelphia yesterday, the entire city.
Austin Harif was born on December 21st, 1996 to a dentist and a pharmacist. They lived in a beautiful home in Palm Beach County, Florida, which is not only one of the nicest and wealthiest places to live in Florida, but it is one of the nicest and wealthiest places to live in all of America. And that's why, as of 2021, there are 44 billionaires that call this paradise their home. In 2010, when Austin was 13 years old, his parents suddenly got divorced, and within the same calendar year, both of his parents had new girlfriends and boyfriends. Now, of course, this was a shock to Austin and to his 1 year younger sister Haley, but they both relatively quickly adjusted to their new normal. And that was in large part because the kids didn't move out. They stayed in the family home with their mom, and their father, he did move out, but he moved into a home that was very close by. About a year after the divorce, Austin began high school, and immediately he excelled. He was placed into all advanced classes, and within these advanced classes, Austin was consistently at the top of his class. Austin was also a big athletic guy. He was about 6 feet tall and weighed about 200 pounds. And so naturally, he played football for all 4 years he was in high school. And for 1 year, his sophomore year, he also wrestled. But despite his size and willingness to play these very rough physical sports, Austin was not an aggressive guy. In fact, his football coaches actually used to criticize him for not being aggressive enough. And on game days, they would try to make him mad in hopes that would inspire him to go out there.
Anybody ever play high school football? Or, football leading up to high school? I played like 8 or 9 years. They yell at you for everything. You never do anything right. You're always wrong. And if you do anything right, it's, yeah, good job. And then I remember saying to a coach, how come you guys scold more, but you never reward? You're never like, hey, that was an excellent thing. And they're like, because that's what you're supposed to do. It's like, yeah, but you don't have to be a dick. Like, you're not going to get through to some people, me included, if you're just constantly a dick. Because I'll shut it out. I won't listen to you anymore. Because I believe that your opinion is no longer valid. You're not teaching. You're just there to hurt. Like, to me, you're weak. You're using your weakness in a position of power. This isn't all the coaches that I've encountered. I've encountered some great ones who just pull you aside afterwards and they turn a conversation about I was a running back and safety and stuff like that. And they turn a conversation from how to properly read the hole you're about to run through and to avoid the tackler into some discussion about life. And you're just like, how what? And next thing you know, you're engaged in this thing and you're listening to him and you're just like, I totally get it. Like, this was an explanation that was it's almost gifted to have gotten from point A to point B. It's I don't know. There are some people that are just great at communicating and other people who are just, anyways, but that was just, it just got me thinking.
And smash some people. But it really didn't work because Austin was Austin. He was just kind of a laid-back guy who was actually much more interested in helping people than smashing them. In fact, towards the end of high school, Austin became obsessed with trying to identify a career that would allow him to help the most people. And he was so passionate about this that when he spoke about it, a huge smile would kind of involuntarily appear on his face. And so because of this, and because of Austin's generally happy disposition, his father very lovingly began referring to him as the happy boy.
Sounds like he has a good heart. Wait, now I'm rereading the title. This is going to be crushing, isn't it?
Before Austin's graduation in 2015, he received a letter in the mail from Florida State University, and it was informing him he had been accepted into their 4-year pre-med program. Austin had settled on medicine as being his intended career path to help the most people, and so being accepted into this very prestigious program was like a best-case scenario. And so Austin and his family were elated, and that summer that followed his high school graduation was totally charmed. Austin was on cloud 9. He spent a lot of time with his family and his friends. And then finally, at the end of the summer, his family packed all of his stuff into the car and they drove 6 hours north to Tallahassee, where the Florida State campus was. They helped to move him into his dorm, and then afterwards they gave him a big hug, said good luck, and they left. And I'm sure on their ride back, the family members thought to themselves, Austin is doing so great. He is not only ready for college, he is ready to be an adult. He's ready to live on his own and be responsible. And at the end of Austin's first year in college, that supposition about him ready to be an adult seemed to be accurate. Austin got excellent grades, he met a nice girlfriend, and even though he wasn't playing organized sports like football, he had found another athletic outlet in bodybuilding, and he had actually built a decent-sized social media presence around bodybuilding and fitness. But underneath all of this public success Austin was having that year, he was actually struggling a lot of the time. He just wasn't telling anyone. In a journal he kept, he documented a deep sense of inadequacy caused primarily from his sense that his peers didn't accept him. And so he would write endlessly about how...
I just want to say, there was one time, and it creeps in every now and then. I try to work hard, and I work a lot. And I will look around at other people, and I get jealous of them because maybe they're working 35 hours and I'm working 50, 55, and I feel like they're accomplishing more than I am. And yet I can have a conversation with them and they're like, man, you're killing it. You're doing a great job. Da, da, da. But I always feel like I'm inadequate to them. And so it makes me want to, so I install flooring. So it makes me want to install a room faster. It makes me want to make it look better. You know, like I get this it's a weird, it's like a jealousy drive. I think they're doing better, so I'm going to whoop them in what we can do, like, and it's a competition, and I want to be faster. I want to make it look better. I want to have it cleaned up and you know, seen better and everything. And then I feel like I've won. I don't know what it is. It's just a competitive thing in me, but it makes no sense. But like, I'm motivated by things that I probably shouldn't be motivated by. My YouTube channel, I have 54 people. I'm not making any money doing this, but I'm trying to make videos. I have like this 73 videos out, and I have another 4 or 5 that are banked. I would love to hit the day when I have more subscribers than videos. I'd love to hit the day when I can profit from it. But I look at all the other people that do reaction videos, and I will watch them, and I'll think, I can make better comments than that guy. I can do this, I can do that. I got better stories that are relatable. And there's something in me that gets mad and despises them, and I want to outwork them, and I want to do something more. And I don't know, maybe it's something petty inside of me that just it's always been that way. Even when I'm talking about football, playing football, I would see somebody that was faster than me, and I would think, well, I'm going to try to get faster, but if I can't get faster, I'm going to hit harder than they do, and I'm going to hit them, or I'm going to be better at my position than they could be, or whatever. And it's always me wanting to just be better in some competition that they don't even know exists. I'll tell you this. You know, when you pull up to a stoplight, somebody else pulls up to a stoplight. You got a red light. Your lane goes, but eventually it has to merge into one lane. And you're in the lane that has to merge over. Some people hit the gas and allow that person to go, and they merge behind them. People like me, I hit the gas to beat them, unless it's a cop. Then I'm just like, 10 and 2, hello, officer, how you doing? I'm not even looking at you. I'm looking straight ahead because rules of the road, I think that's what I'm supposed to do. But like, it's inherent in me. I don't know. It's probably not a good thing. It's probably not a very good thing to have, a jealousy drive. I don't ever want to hurt somebody. I just want to be better than them. You know, that's I think that's why I do side jobs. It's so I can make more money on a side job than somebody else does on their side job. And maybe I worked for an hour more, and I can say, oh, I made $300 more than you did, or whatever. It's weird. It makes sense. I apologize. I'm trying to relate more to you all.
If he could just stop being so shy and be more assertive and outgoing, that more people would embrace him and would like him and would accept him. Over the course of that year, Austin also started abusing different substances. Those included things like alcohol, marijuana, and Vyvanse. Vyvanse is a drug that is a stimulant, and it's used to treat people with attention deficit disorder. He also experimented with hallucinogenic drugs like acid and mushrooms, and he also tried MDMA, which is kind of like a cross between a stimulant and a hallucinogenic. And those are just the drugs that we are aware he was taking. It's entirely possible he was taking other drugs too. Regardless, Austin began oscillating between the high of whatever drug or combination of drugs he was on to the low of his sober mind, which was totally saturated with anxious and depressive thoughts. Before the end of the school year, Austin was secretly poised for a full-blown mental breakdown, and it seemed like he knew it was coming too. In the last month before the end of school, his internet search history is filled with questions like, "I think I'm crazy, what do I do?" And "How do you know if you're crazy?" And "How to deal with obsessive thoughts?" And "Do I need to sleep?" And "What happens if you don't sleep?" It was clear he was starting to question his own.
If anybody out there is dealing with similar issues, it's just, it is a, it's pure mental. And the hardest thing to do is to get out of your own head. I know. I suffered from depression when I was 17, and it got so bad that I refused to get out of bed for like a week. I'm not suicidal, never was, never thought about it, never would be. If you ever hear about me dying from suicide, I was murdered. Suicide is not my option. Suicide's not my option. Killing myself, not my option, period. But I was bad, and I thought that I had mental problems. I thought that it was, I was seeing the world in this way that didn't want me, didn't like me, didn't appreciate me. I'm sure some of the things today stem from that. And I with my mom and my grandparents, the four of us went down to this mental hospital, and I thought I needed to be checked in. I thought I needed to be looked at. So we walked through the place, and I saw all these people on all this medication, and I realized, I'm fine compared to them. These people have problems. I don't. Like, it hit me right then in that moment. I'm not this low. Well, they didn't want to let me go. They thought, well, since I'm there, I'm checked in, and this is voluntary. I could have literally checked out. Well, I couldn't have. I was 17, you had to be 18. My mother and grandparents were there, and they're like, well, fine, we're checking him out. And they're like, well, he has to be here for a week for evaluation. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm good. And so they brought up these two guards, and they had the white shirts and everything. It's what you'd see in the movie. And my grandfather, we didn't get along at the end of his life, but in this moment, he grabbed a pencil and he handed it to me, and then he grabbed a pencil, and there was a sharpened pencil, and he was like, let's do this. And me and him apparently were going to be taking on these guards. We were going to be killing them. And I was just like, okay, all right, Grandpa, you got my back. He was a co-signer on a car loan. He was a ride or die for me at that moment. So I just realized that, like, I didn't have issues. They released me, and it took a while for me to get out of that. I had to change where I lived. It was a really sad time in my period. And then once I cleared out of it, I realized that there was nothing sad about it. It was me. It was me beating myself up over what? Like, I had problems with people and stuff like that, but my mind made it worse by escalating it in my mind. I heard a great line that said, and I'm going to butcher it, and I apologize, but it said, imagine you're meeting friends or whatever, and then you don't want to hang out with one friend because you believe that they've talked trash about you and they're being mean to you behind your back and da-da-da. Take a second, step back, and ask yourself, where did you hear that? No one told you. You made it up in your mind. So if your mind just made that incident up, then you're going to roll with it as though it's a truth. So you have to cut your mind out of things at times and just go, and just know that your mind is always trying to protect you, but at the same time it will work itself up into a frenzy. I ended up coming into depression again. It was probably about 7 years later, and I got really low, and I didn't want to get the previous low again. So I just changed my routine. I started waking up early and exercising, taking my dog for a walk. I set goals for myself that would be really weird, like try to drink 32 ounces of water within the first 3 hours of waking up. And don't eat this, eat that. Like, don't eat eggs, scrambled eggs. Eat instant oatmeal and toast. And I just tried to change everything. And I ended up getting out of it by laughing at how I had done everything I could to change, figuring I'm going to change literally everything about myself so that old Kris was depressed. This new one, he's got a regiment. Like, he's doing things. And then I laughed at myself, and I was like, I'm not, and I've never had an issue since. I felt him coming on here and there, but I just remember if I allow it, it'll sink in, and it gets its hooks in, and it can really be bad. Never suicidal bad. It just gets me low. It makes me feel like I'm not appreciated. I'm not liked. I don't want to be around people. And I'll sit by myself, and I don't want to talk to people. And it's just like, it's me. It's my own mind doing this to me. And, you know, I've never had an issue with it. I think once I mentally addressed it, I never had an issue with it. But, you know, if you are dealing with things like that, I've put my email in things before, and I've had people reach out to me. I'll put it out again. usninc@gmail.com. You can email me, and you can. That was Schwann's delivery. They're not. They want nothing to do with this conversation. Convenient timing, though. But yeah, it's all in your head. It really is. There isn't anything going on outside of you actually murdering somebody or hurting someone in any way. There isn't anything that can't be dealt with. You know, so long as you don't hurt yourself and you don't hurt others, everything can be worked out. And you'll find it's actually talking to somebody, it's so therapeutic. You deal with it on such a level that you don't realize how everything feels like it's knotted up inside of you. But once you start talking, it's like trying to unwind a hose, and then it gets turned on and it starts unwinding itself, and next thing you know, things are coming out of your mouth, and you filled with so much emotion, tears of anger and happiness, and you realize that, man, there was a treasure chest box that was just locked, and it's going. When my mother died, I found her, and it was not pleasant. Although she didn't look bad, she just looked like she was sleeping. She died of a heart attack. I didn't cry. I went kind of cold and into shock. I made phone calls to my sisters and some family, and I didn't deal with it at all until that night when it was just me, and I just hugged a pillow and I rocked back and forth, and it just hit me then. It was probably 14 hours later, and I spent all night basically crying. I was crying so much my head hurt, my nose was bloody, I didn't have any more water coming out of my face. My arms hurt from hugging a pillow, my back hurt from just rocking back and forth, and I didn't sleep at all. And I took my dog for a walk in the morning, and I don't know why it is, but we always listen to sad music when sad things are happening, just because it's kind of weird to want to listen to, LMFAO party rock songs when you're dealing with a death in the family. It's inappropriate. And I was just listening to sad songs, and I wasn't crying, but I wanted to, but I couldn't get past that lip quiver. Nothing was happening beyond that. And I ended up turning that sadness into humor for me, by all of us decided we were going to speak at her funeral. And I wrote I just started writing just stories. And I wrote it was 7 pages, front and back. And I was like, I'm not going to read 7 pages front and back. I'm not going to take up that much time. And I whittled it down to about 1.5 pages. And I just said all kinds of things. Things that if my mother was there, my mom would go, no, that's not true at all. But people were laughing. And, I wanted to embarrass my mother in a way, but in a funny way. I told people short things, quick notes. I told stories about, I once told my mom that these hands were aerodynamically designed to beat her down. And she was like, oh, and then she took off her shoe and I ran because, I was an adult. And she laughed at that. She thought it was hilarious. And I told that story. And the looks in the audience, some people didn't get it and some people did. Some people took it personal, oh my gosh, it's he hit women? That's terrible. And it's just, shut up. And others, they laughed because they understood. And I did quick things, in case people didn't know things about my mother. And I was like, my mother was a huge fan of NWA, which she was not. I said she used to refer to other people's dogs as their woofs. You got a nice woof. And but as I was reading it, I have, she's practically a sister named Ray. And she was sitting there and she was laughing at everything. Tears were rolling down her face. She was cracking up the whole time. And that, I didn't care about anyone else at that moment. I just was happy to make her laugh because she really knew my mom. And so she was laughing because she knew my mom would if my mom could sit up and go, nothing he's saying is accurate. Minus what he did say to me about the fists. He's exaggerating everything, but we all told stories. I'm getting sidetracked completely. But the point is, if you are dealing with any kind of mental issues or anything like that, trust me when I tell you there are ways, there are outlets. It's just like suicide thoughts. You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you if you think this way. Just know that there are people that are willing to talk it out with you. Let's see what's the underlying issue. Because there's always an underlying issue. It's never just suddenly this happens. You're leading a great life and suddenly this just happens. Never. Never happens like that. Something creeps up on you from your past. And all issues can be dealt with. Just don't hurt yourself or hurt anyone else, and everything can be worked out. That's a long-winded answer. I do apologize, but I had to say it. Back to my Laffy Taffy.
When Austin finally returned back home from Florida State that summer, his family immediately noticed there was something wrong with Austin. Within a few days of being home, Austin had moved his bed from his bedroom down into the garage, claiming that the reason he did this was because the house was full of demons. At night, instead of sleeping, Austin would patrol the house. He would literally just walk all around the house all night, never stopping, and every 2 hours he would knock on the bedroom doors of his family members and loudly announce that he was guarding them from the demons in the house. Now, you can imagine how his family felt at the time. This was so unbelievably weird and totally out of character that they just didn't really know what to do. Even though it was obvious there was something wrong, they didn't jump into action. Instead, the only thing they did at first was to just start locking their bedroom doors at night to prevent Austin from coming inside during his nighttime patrols. But as the summer progressed and Austin continued to act totally weird with no explanation, his family began to become convinced that he must be on drugs, that is what would explain all of this totally strange behavior. And so when they confronted him about his drug use, he would admit that he was taking drugs, lots of different drugs, psychedelics, stimulants, you name it. He's taking all these drugs. And so naturally, his family latched on to his drug use as being the root cause of his very strange behavior. And so they focused their efforts almost exclusively on getting Austin clean again. But towards the end of the summer, Austin said he wasn't taking any drugs, but Austin was still acting totally crazy and unhinged. And so around mid-August, the family decided they had to utilize something called the Baker Act. Under the Baker Act, individuals in Florida who are suspected of severe mental illness can be detained for up to 72 hours at the behest of their loved ones. And during these 72 hours, this individual is thoroughly assessed to see what's going on with them. And then at the end of those 72 hours, they are given a treatment plan that their family is supposed to help them enact. But before the family could utilize the Baker Act, something horrific happened. On the morning of...
I would just say that if the person did get... the Baker Act sounds like it's a really good plan. I think 72 hours is too short, maybe 5 days. Or maybe an allowance of up to 7 days. Because I know being involuntarily held, you're not going to... You're not going to be willing... Not everyone. Some people are going to be willing to communicate. Others, you're going to hold that inside. You're going to take it out on your family. So that is now I've just convinced myself maybe it's not a good idea. I don't know who you would contact. I mean, you can't just call the police. My son's acting weird. He's protecting the house against demons. Like, what's a cop supposed to do? This is a tough one.
August 15th, one of Austin's very close friends, who he had known since second grade, said Austin just showed up at his house without calling ahead of time or letting him know, which was very uncharacteristic. And when this friend opened the door to see what Austin wanted, Austin just asked him, "What year was I born?" And so the friend says, 1996? And as soon as Austin heard this, he didn't give a reaction to it. He just turned around and he left. And so this longtime friend is looking at Austin walking away, wondering, like, what's going on with this guy? Is he high on drugs? Is he drunk? Like, what was that? So the friend goes back inside his house and he's thinking to himself, like, what should I do? And so after a couple of minutes, he decides, you know what, I got to call Austin and make sure he's okay. So he calls Austin, Austin picks up, and it's unclear what they talked about on the phone, but the friend convinced Austin to come back to his house and to just spend the day with him. But really, the friend just wanted to make sure Austin was okay. And so Austin comes back to the friend's house, and then the two of them actually would leave the house and meet up with some of their other friends that were in town that summer, as well as meet up with Austin's sister. And so the group, they decide they're going to go to the beach for the day. And on their walk to the beach, Austin tells the group that he just needs to get something at his house and that he will meet them down at the water. And so at this point, the group believes Austin is just fine. So they say, okay, yep, we'll meet you down there. And so Austin breaks off. He goes to his house. And when he goes back to the beach and meets up with his group of friends again, he's changed his outfit. He was now wearing this very thick, large football jersey. He was wearing long sweatpants that were also very thick. He had on 2 wristwatches and he had on sunglasses. And so as he walks down onto the beach, his friends look up at him, and it's super hot out, and they're at the beach. So this is a totally weird outfit to have on. And immediately they start kind of giving him crap about his strange outfit choice. But Austin did not think it was funny at all. And at first he was quiet, but then he kind of lashed out and said, "If you tell me I'm crazy, I will kill you." And at this, his friends did not give him any more crap. Everyone just said, "Okay, man, hey, didn't mean anything by it, just giving you a hard time, no big deal." But Austin's like clearly worked up, and so his sister comes over to him and she's like, "Hey, calm down, it's okay, it's not a big deal." And during this conversation, Austin suddenly goes back to being normal again, and he turns to his sister and he says, "I'm actually half horse, and I'm immortal." And his sister's like, "What? You really need to get professional help. You need to see a therapist or a psychologist or something. Something is wrong with you, and it's been wrong all summer. You need to get help." Now,
remember what I was saying earlier about the Baker Act may not be good? The Baker Act sounds like it's a very good program. This gentleman should be in it, or should have been in it.
Apparently, Austin actually responded to this very positively, and he said, "You know, I agree. There is something going on, and I do need to get help. You're right." And so after that, Austin and the rest of the group, they stayed at the beach for several hours. And then in the evening time, Austin, his sister, and Austin's very close friend, who was the guy that saw Austin in the morning when he asked, what year was I born, they all said they had to leave. And so the trio, they leave the beach and they head to Duffy's, which was a restaurant in town. And they were going there to meet up with Austin's father and his father's girlfriend. And so as they're getting to this restaurant, they're walking along the sidewalk, they're nearing this restaurant, when suddenly Austin turns to his sister and says, "Hey, I need to test out my immortality." And he just turns away from her, away from the sidewalk, towards traffic, and just starts walking into traffic like he's going to let a car hit him to test his immortality. And so his sister immediately was able to grab him and pulled him back onto the sidewalk, and then basically stood on the left side of him, preventing him from running out into traffic, and kind of pushed him along up the sidewalk right up to the front door of this restaurant. And when they got there, Austin had stopped trying to walk out into traffic. He was acting normal again, and it was there that the trio met up with Austin's father and his father's girlfriend, and the five of them went into Duffy's restaurant. It was about 7:45 p.m. when they got inside, and they were very quickly sat in the very back of the restaurant in this booth. And so there was a CCTV camera that watched them while they were inside this building. And so they're sitting at this booth, and about 3 minutes after having sat down, Austin gets up and walks away from the booth and walks as if he's going towards the bathroom, but then stops, doesn't go to the bathroom, turns around and walks back towards the front of the building, and then walks out the front doors, just leaves the restaurant altogether. Now, it's unclear if the rest of his family saw him do this. It doesn't seem like they did. But just a minute later, Austin comes back inside the restaurant and just walks right back to his table and sits down like nothing had ever happened. Less than 10 minutes later, Austin would get up again from his table, except this time, instead of feigning going to the bathroom, he just walks straight from his table right out the front doors of the restaurant and disappears. A couple minutes later, Austin's mother, who was not at dinner with them, she was at her home, which happened to be nearby this restaurant. She was home when she heard the sound of someone coming into her house. And so she went around to see who it was, and she found her son, Austin, in her kitchen, drinking vegetable oil, and there was Parmesan cheese all over the counter that apparently he had been eating as well. And so she runs up to him and she grabs the vegetable oil and she puts it down and she tells him to stop, at which point Austin does stop. And then I guess Austin just went up to his room and he changed out of his clothes because perhaps he got oil all over his shirt. And then his mom just drove him back to the restaurant. And so she watched him get out of the car and she watched him go through the front door, and then she drove off. And so about 30 minutes after he left that second time, Austin walks through the front doors of the restaurant. He's got a different shirt on, different hat on, and he just walks to the back of the restaurant where his sister, his friend, and his father and his father's girlfriend are, and he sits down like nothing had ever happened. At first, it looks like everyone at the table is just silent. But then Austin's father very clearly said something to Austin, and it seems kind of hostile. And it would turn out Austin's father, who loved his son, was just totally at a loss for what to do with him, and he said to Austin when he sat back down, "What is wrong with you?" And at this, Austin just stands up and presses his father's face back up against his seat, kind of pinning him there, and then at some point he just lets go, he leaves the booth, and he walks right out of the restaurant for a third time. Austin's friend, who was eating with them, he got up and kind of chased after Austin, but he was about 30 seconds behind him, and so by the time he got outside, he didn't know where Austin went, and so he quickly came back in the restaurant. He told the rest of the group he didn't know where Austin was, and so at this point, Austin's father's girlfriend would actually call the police and report Austin missing. They knew he was totally unhinged, and they didn't know where he was going to go, if he was a threat to himself or someone else, and so they figured they should just tell the police and have the police go find him. About 4 miles away.
This is a stupid guess. Is he taking steroids? Because the aggression I can see, but I don't know what's just steroids make you weird. I'm sorry.
From this restaurant, 53-year-old Michelle Mishkon was sitting in her garage watching TV. Normally, she would be joined by her husband, 59-year-old John Stevens, but he was out walking their dog, so for the time being, Michelle was alone. The couple had been married for roughly 20 years, they had 3 kids together from previous marriages, and they were just totally in love with each other. That garage was like their happy place. That was basically like their living room. They loved having the door wide open so they could wave to neighbors and flag people down to have a drink with them or just chat with them. They were just known to be a very happy, loving couple that were fun to be around. And according to their...
To me, it's weird to have your TV and all that stuff in your garage, but I can totally see it. I mean, look, there are people who sit up on their front porch with TVs around here, so I can't really say anything. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's kind of like you could treat it like a porch in a way, call people up. Hey, how you doing? Come have a drink. Watching TV. They're in Florida, so the weather's got to be nice. I'm sure it's hot a lot, but it's got to be beautiful, compared to here. So that's, okay. Teach their own.
Kids, they had both recently retired. John retired from his landscaping company that he owned, and Michelle retired from her financial advisory job, and the two of them were apparently both just really excited about retirement life. They were excited to spend more time together and go out with their friends and go out fishing on their boat with their dog, and then also spend as much time as they could just lounging back in their garage. John and Michelle's neighbor across the street was a middle-aged man named Jeff Fisher. Jeff was fairly close with the couple. He would usually watch their dogs anytime they went away, and he would often go in their garage and have a drink and just kind of hang out with them. And so this particular night, he was over in his house and he was going to bed early. So he laid down in his bed, he's getting ready to go to sleep, when he hears some strange sounds coming from outside his window across the street over near John and Michelle's property. And so Jeff sits up in his bed and kind of strains his ears to see what it was that he heard. And as he's trying to listen for some faint sound, he suddenly hears a blood-curdling scream, a woman's scream, coming from across the street. And so Jeff instantly leapt into action. He jumped out of his bed, he ran downstairs, and he ran out his front door, and he looked across the street, and he saw this unknown man, some young man that was slamming the car door of Michelle's car that was parked in her driveway, and he begins walking up the driveway, and at the top of the driveway, Jeff sees Michelle is standing in the garage, and she looks totally terrified, and she's facing this unknown young man. And of course, this unknown young man was Austin Harif. Now, Jeff had no idea what was actually going on. All he knew was he heard this scream, which was probably Michelle, and he's looking out there and he's seeing a situation that just doesn't look good. And so instinctively, he decided he would just run across the street and make sure Michelle was okay. And if he had to, he would confront this unknown man, Austin. So Jeff begins running across his property, trying to get across the street to Michelle, but before he could even get across the street, he's looking up and he can see this guy, Austin, has grabbed Michelle and thrown her on the ground, and now he's on top of her and he's beating her. And so Jeff runs onto the driveway, and as he's going right up the driveway between the two cars that were parked there, Austin leaps off of Michelle. He turns around and he looks at Jeff and he says, "You don't want a part of this." And now Jeff, he's a pretty big guy, and so he's looking at Austin and he knows that if he doesn't do anything, this guy is just going to continue pummeling poor Michelle, and he had no idea where John was. And so he ran up and kind of lunged at Austin, and as he did that, Austin swung and he hit Jeff right across the side of the head. But Jeff took the hit, he didn't fall down, he grabbed Austin by the collar and threw him as hard as he could to the ground. And Austin, he hit the pavement hard, face first. And so Jeff is looking at this guy, kind of thinking he's not going to get up. But
jump on him.
Assessing the situation.
Just jump on him. Like, don't think he's not going to... Just jump on him. Choke the dude out. I'm not saying kill him, but you know what I mean? Like, do something. Jump on him, hold him down, restrain him, choke him out, keep screaming, get other people's attention. What are you doing?
Watching Austin stand back up again, Jeff...
I apologize. It's not that guy's fault. That guy, it's the kid Austin's fault. But in these moments, you just...
suddenly feels a blinding pain in his face, in the side of his head, in his neck, on his back, and he looks down and he sees blood all over his arms. It's everywhere. He's covered in blood. It would turn out Austin was carrying a knife. And so when he punched Jeff, that knife went into his face, it cut the side of his head, it cut his neck, and it cut his back. He had 5 different puncture points from that one swing. And so Jeff believed at the time this was a potentially fatal wound. He was worried perhaps his jugular had been struck and he was bleeding to death. And he's seeing Austin stand back up, coming right after him with this knife. And so Jeff decides their only chance is for him to run and call the police. And so he runs into Michelle's property. He's thinking that he's kind of drawing this guy towards him away from Michelle. He runs into their property, kind of slams into all their doors. He goes out a back door and then he loops around the property and then he makes a run for it straight across the street to his house. Never once did he turn around to see if this guy was after him. He figured he was right behind him. He gets to his house, he runs inside, he locks the door, and then he calls 911.
Police and medical. Young man beating up a woman across the street.
Are either of them injured? Can you tell from where you are?
Yes, there's a girl laying on the ground. He beat her up. I ran over there. I'm bleeding profusely here at the moment.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Can you tell if she's conscious?
No, it does not appear so, no. I've been stabbed in the back. I'm bleeding pretty bad.
After the call is placed and Jeff is certain that help is on the way, he's barely conscious, but all he can remember thinking was, I hope this maniac, Austin, has abandoned his attack and just run off. Or, I hope John has come out.
I would have went home. I would have grabbed my weapon. I would have ran back over there. If you're going to die because you're bleeding out, the ambulance is going to get to you. You're going to bleed out, yes or no. It is what it is. I would have went over there and I would have made sure that, I don't know about the woman, but the kid would have been killed. I would have unloaded a clip, loaded a new one, finished that one too. Like, he tried to kill me. That would have been a guaranteed death sentence for him. That's just me.
Outside and he's helping his wife, but unfortunately all Jeff could hear was the sound of Austin across the street making these loud animalistic grunting sounds, and at the same time he hears the sound of someone screaming at the top of their lungs. He doesn't even know if it's one person, if it's 2 people, if it's male, if it's female. All he hears is screams and grunting sounds. And then seconds later, the police show up. The following narrative is the account of the second responding officer, who we'll just call Dan, and the first responding officer we'll just call Kristen. And so Dan, he comes flying down the street, he's got his sirens on, and he pulls in right behind Kristen's cop car, which is parked right out in front of John and Michelle's property. Kristen is already running up the driveway, her gun is out, she's getting ready to engage somebody at the top of the driveway. And so Dan, he hops out of his car, he's got his hand on his gun, and as he turns to run up the driveway, his view is obscured. There are 2 cars parked in the driveway, and so he can't see what's at the top of the driveway that Kristen is apparently getting ready to draw her gun on. But as he begins running up the driveway, he sees there is this massive 6-foot wide stream of blood just coming down the driveway. And so he goes around the left side of the left car, he goes up and he sees Kristen right at the top of the driveway. She's got her gun aimed at the ground right in front of the car, so he can't see what's in front of the car yet. He comes bombing around the left side right behind Kristen, and he looks down at what she's aiming her gun at, and he sees there's this man lying on the ground, his eyes are open. He's just laying there kind of stiff, and he's looking up at Kristen and he's looking up at Dan, and he's just quietly saying, please help me. The man on the ground was John Stevens, and on top of John Stevens was Austin. He was kind of laying sideways on John's chest. He had his left arm wrapped around John's neck to kind of hold him in place, and then he had his right arm and he was doing something to John's face. But Dan couldn't really tell what he was doing. All he could take in,
The dude just laid there the whole time?
was there was clearly an aggressor and they needed to get him off of the victim. But Kristen could not take the shot because if she did, she ran the risk of firing the bullet through Austin into John, killing John. And so Dan tells Kristen, hold on, I'm going to tase him. And so he moves around Kristen.
You grab him by the hair, you pull him back, and you just shoot him in the face.
To her left side, so he's positioned looking down at the back of Austin. He pulls out his taser, and right before he shoots his taser into Austin's back, he sees what Austin is doing to John's face. With his free right hand, he was reaching into John's mouth and pulling his cheek out, kind of like a fish hook. He was pulling it out as far as he could, and then he was biting into John's cheek, and he was ripping out pieces of flesh and chewing and swallowing them.
And that dude's just sitting there with his arms out.
His position, Dan only saw this for a second, but he suddenly noticed, and Kristen, the other officer, would later confirm, there were all these chunks already missing from John's face. And so Dan kind of snapped out of what he was seeing and fired his taser into the back of Austin, but it did nothing. It had absolutely no effect. Austin was entirely focused on biting John's face. That was all he was doing. He wasn't even registering that there were cops with their guns drawn on him. It was like they weren't even there. And so Dan runs back around Kristen to the other side of her. He's now on her right side, so he's standing right next to the car, looking down at...
Don't they have police batons? Can't you just hit him in the back of the head? Can't you just grab him and pull him off? Why are you just standing there watching? And that dude just laying there with his arms out like, help me, help me. Why don't you do something? You got 2 free hands. Oh, this is pissing me off.
Austin's front. And he tells Kristen to kind of back up for a second.
And it's not the guy's fault. Again, it's the kid. But I'm just angered at the zero survival skills that this guy has, apparently. Everything is bothering me.
And then Dan winds up and kicks Austin square in the face, knocking his head off of John's face. But as soon as Austin comes off of John, he doesn't get up and try to fight with Dan. Instead, he just jumps back down, gets a deeper grip on John, and plunges his mouth back onto John's face. And so again, Dan winds up and boots Austin square in the face, knocking his head back. But again, he's totally unfazed. He doesn't want to attack the officers.
Why don't the other officers do something instead of just watching? Hey, I got an idea. You kick him in the face, and then I'll grab him and tackle him, and we can all pin him down. Like, why are you just... I'm going to kick him, and everyone else just stand there. Stupid.
He just wants to eat John's face. And so he goes right back down, gets a tighter grip, he goes back and he starts chewing on John's face again. And so Dan was just repeatedly kicking him in the face over and over and over again, right as another set of officers showed up, and they had a canine, they had a dog. And so they come flying up, they kind of see the situation, and Dan tells them, release the dog. And so sure enough, they release the canine. The canine clamps down on Austin's right arm, the arm that was fish hooking and kind of pulling John's face out. And the dog really got a good bite on his arm and yanked it away from John's face. But Austin just instantly ripped his arm back, doing severe damage to his arm from the dog's teeth, and just repositioned himself and went back to biting John's face. And so the dog, just as it was trained, did another bite. It grabbed back onto Austin's arm and it pulled it off of John's body. And so his arm is back like this again. And Austin, again, unfazed, just yanked his arm out of the dog's teeth again.
So the cops just standing there with their guns drawn, just like, well, somebody has to do something. Why don't you all just jump on the guy? How about that?
Shredding the muscles of his arm and gets back in position and continues to eat John's face. And then finally the dog gets another bite into Austin's arm, and this time when the dog managed to yank Austin's arm away from John, Dan timed it so he booted Austin square in the face right as his arm was being pulled back, and he hit him hard enough that Austin actually flew off of John and landed on his back. And as soon as he was on the ground, Dan actually leapt over John and landed on Austin's face, smashing his head into the cement, which kind of stunned him for a second. And as soon as he was stunned, Dan whipped out his handcuffs, threw it over one of Austin's wrists, and began pulling him by the handcuff up the driveway away from John. But as soon as he had some separation and Dan went to put the other handcuff on Austin, Austin began fighting back, and he looked up at Dan and he screamed, "Kill me! I'm eating humans! Kill me!" Dan didn't even know what to do, and so he's trying to put the other handcuff on him the whole time. Austin is screaming, "Kill me! Kill me!" And so other officers had to run in, and then finally, after 3 other officers came over, they were able to hold Austin down long enough to get both handcuffs on him. After Austin was finally restrained, the officers checked on the victims. They checked on Michelle, who was in the garage, and unfortunately, she was deceased. She had died from blunt force trauma. And John, even though he had been alive when the police first showed up, he had succumbed to the multitude of injuries he had sustained, from stabbings to beatings to having a portion of his face ripped off.
Oh, so that guy, he was probably... That's why he's just laying there with his hands out. He's probably too weak to do anything. Probably so much blood loss. I didn't think about that. I was getting mad that he wasn't fighting back. Because as long as my heart's still beating and blood's in my body, I'm fighting. I'm not just going to surrender. Okay.
It's believed after John came back from his walk, which would have been right after Jeff had been attacked and ran back to his house, John saw Austin in his garage attacking his wife, and John ran in to try to save her. And so ultimately John would die trying to save the woman that he loved. Their dog would survive the attack. It was unharmed, and it was given to one of their children to take care of. And Jeff Fisher, the neighbor who tried to save John and Michelle, he would survive the attack and make a full recovery. After Austin was finally handcuffed and was laying restrained on the driveway, he suddenly became unresponsive. He was rushed to the hospital, where it was determined he had drank some poisonous chemicals, most likely from inside of John and Michelle's garage, and that was what was causing his organs to fail. Ultimately, Austin would go into a coma for 11 days from whatever he ingested, but the doctors were able to save his life, and so he would come out of that coma and he would make a full physical recovery. It was initially assumed that because of Austin's drug abuse history, that he must have been on some drug when he perpetrated this heinous crime. It was speculated that he could have been on bath salts or flakka, which are these synthetic hallucinogenic drugs, which are very powerful, and at the time they were quite popular in Florida, and they'd caused some other users to go on these kind of wild, violent rampages. And so it seemed to make a lot of sense that he must have been on one of those. But when Austin's toxicology report finally came back, it showed he only had a very small amount of THC in his system, which is the drug found in marijuana, and then the other drugs that were in his system were all induced by the doctors and nurses at the hospital, which meant at the time of this attack, Austin was effectively sober. When the police asked Austin, "Why did you do this?" he initially said, "I don't remember, I don't know," but eventually he would open up and he would tell this story that no sane person could possibly understand. He said after he left that restaurant where his family was that third time, after he fought with his father and he stormed out, after that, he saw this dark figure outside with a white face, and he knew immediately that this figure was evil. And so instinctively, Austin began running away from this evil figure. And so he ran about 4 miles into John and Michelle's neighborhood. And when he got to this neighborhood, a neighborhood he was not familiar with, that he didn't intend to go to on purpose, he just kind of wound up there, he said he saw this brightly lit up garage, and he ran up into it, believing he could enlist the help of the people inside of this house, and that they would help him defeat this evil figure that was lurking somewhere nearby. And so he runs up into this garage, which happens to be John and Michelle's garage, and Michelle is in there. John is not. He's out for the walk with his dog, and Austin approaches her and tries to get her to help him, but he probably came off looking completely insane, and Michelle screamed. At which point, Austin said he believed Michelle was a witch, and so he pulled out his knife and he attacked her. And then after she fell to the ground, Austin said he drank a bottle of alcohol or something, which we now know was most likely very poisonous lawn chemicals that was just in the garage. After he drinks that bottle, he turns around and now he's looking out of the garage towards the street, and he said he saw this other figure in the doorway with a dog next to him, and then Austin said his mind just went blank. It's believed the figure he saw in the doorway was John Stevens returning from his walk, but we don't know for sure, and frankly, this story is pretty incoherent to begin with, because it doesn't account for the fact that before John came back, Austin had been grappling with Jeff Fisher and stabbing Jeff Fisher, the neighbor. But Austin would say he has no recollection of encountering Jeff Fisher, he has no recollection of John or what he looked like, and he certainly doesn't remember biting John's face, and he had no memory of any interactions with police. He said that basically he turned around, he sees this figure, this dog, and then his mind went blank, and then he woke up about 2 weeks later in the hospital. Now, when his story went public, a lot of people just were not willing to accept that story. They said he was making it up so he could plead insanity at his trial and get a lesser sentence. But a world-renowned forensic psychologist named Philip Resnick, who had worked on many high-profile cases before, he did a lengthy assessment of Austin, and he came to a very different conclusion than the public. In his 38-page report, Resnick points out the fact that Austin continued to bite John's face even when he was being openly threatened with being shot by the police officer standing right over him. He continued to bite John's face after he was tased. He continued to bite John's face after he was kicked in the head repeatedly. He continued to bite John's face after a dog repeatedly bit him. This all suggests that Austin was truly in a psychotic state when this attack occurred. A sane person, even under the influence of drugs, will retain a basic survival instinct. They will try to protect themselves. So when there are guns pointed at them, or they're being physically harmed, or there's threats of violence, they'll do things to protect themselves. But Austin didn't. It was like he had no idea about anything else except John's face. Resnick specified that the type of psychotic episode that Austin was suffering from on the night of the attack is something called clinical lycanthropy delusions. Clinical lycanthropy is a very rare occurrence where an individual believes they are no longer human. And almost always what they believe they are is something akin to a werewolf. And in Austin's case, it's not that hard to figure out why you might reach that type of conclusion. He had told his sister that he believed he was half horse, and then on a couple other occasions he had told his other friends that he believed he was half dog. And then of course, on the night of the attack, after he killed Michelle, he pounced literally on John and began eating his face while making those loud animalistic grunting sounds. This is behavior that is certainly on par with what you would expect a werewolf to do in a movie. But this was not a movie, this was real life. After Austin came out of his coma, but before he had been transferred to jail, he agreed to do an interview with the clinical psychologist, TV personality Phil McGraw, better known as Dr. Phil. And during their 10-minute Zoom interview, Austin would break down and cry and say he was incredibly sorry to the family of the
Fuck you.
victims, that he didn't really know why it happened, and that clearly there was something wrong with him and he needed help, and he just hoped they could find it in their hearts to eventually forgive him.
Nope.
But it's unlikely the family of the victims are going to forgive him anytime soon, especially when you consider they came out in an interview and said, I hope Austin makes a full recovery from his coma, that he has no brain damage, that he is totally A-okay, so he can be fully aware and lucid when they read him his sentence. A sentence they hoped would be the death penalty. As of right now, though, the family of the victims will just have to keep on waiting because Austin is still in jail awaiting trial. So that's going to do it, guys. If you got something out of...
Wow, I had a lot of emotion on that one. I went from talking about depression to just cussing out a kid. Oh, I was all over the place on this one. I apologize for the length. I know it's probably been a while. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than, yeah, I think I said what I believe about the kid and his apology. I think that the family, I mean, I don't even know what you feel. I'm sure the family would love to bring back some medieval tortures, upside down, sawing a person in half. What is it, a blood eagle? I'm sure they'd like to bring that one back. Yeah. I don't want to say this is a good story, because it wasn't. But this was, yeah. This one was crazy. Man, I was up and down like a roller coaster on this one. I was feeling bad for him. In the end, I'm wanting him to die. I was at Reno 911 when the one guy's talking about talking to the kids. And he's like, what circle the wagon is? And the kids are like, no. And he goes, circle the wagon is when they take all the bunks, right? And they put them together in kind of like a bit of a triangle, and they drape sheets over so you can't see inside what's going on. And they just knock the new guy's teeth out, and they go to town. They just sculpt him and bim, and it's just, and the kids are horrified. Kids are like, and he's just describing how these prisoners are like raping the new guy. I would love to know that he was in a jail cell where they circled the wagons. See you get out of that, wolf boy. Oh, Some prisoners are going to make you howl. Oh, it was what it was. Like and subscribe. I apologize for the length, so I'm going to just go ahead and end it here. Like and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate all the people showing up. I'm getting a lot more 18 to 24. I had a lot of like 25 to 35 range and up to 44. But I'm starting to get some of the younger kids. But, you know, hey, I want everybody to leave comments in there, drop some requests. You can say Hitler in the comments. You know, I don't care if you cuss in the comments. Just don't be disrespectful to each other. I think that's important. And obviously you have to give me love and attention and admiration and adulation and other A words. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I'm going to make some more videos today, but throughout the day. So have a good day, good night, whatever it is, just pick one.